Welcome to the Build with Boundaries podcast. My name is Manaz, and this podcast is for mums who want to carve out time so that you can work in ways that work for you, your life, your family, and of course your business. Together, we will discover why you are not prioritising your business and the actions that you can take so you can live an intentional, productive, and fulfilled life without mum guilt. So let's dive in to today's episode. Welcome back, everyone. So I'm joined with Sarah, and this is our second episode on values. And last time we were talking about how to connect with your why when building your passion business. So if you haven't listened to that, then do go back and listen to that one as well. It was really insightful, and Sarah shared examples there and really got us thinking about values in a different way. So today we're talking about know your stress triggers and how to manage them. We sort of touched on this before, Sarah. So when we get triggered, usually there's a reason, there's like an underlying reason behind it, and it's not usually obvious to us. I mean, as business mums and as busy people in general, juggling multiple responsibilities, we get stressed, and so there are quite often triggers that can be in our environment, in our day-to-day, and when we're busy mums juggling everything, all the responsibilities and a business, it's often things that can trigger us that we don't necessarily realise why they are triggering us. And when we go away and have a little bit of a quiet time and a quiet word with ourselves, we do realise that we kind of spoke out of turn and we didn't need to. But can you explain, like, how does that work? So how do these triggers show up, and what do you see that is causing this stress?
So, everyone experiences stress, and obviously there's different levels of it. I think for me, where it becomes really problematic is when it's over a long period of time. And there's a saying about the universe. It gives you an indication of when something's not right or it's going in the wrong direction. You start with a tap on the shoulder and you end up with a sledgehammer. So often what happens is, people that are in chronically stressful situations for a long time will get signs, and I know this is very much true for myself, of illness, mental health concerns, anxiety, not being able to sleep, there's that whole list of things, and they do get worse and worse. And for me, like in my situation, again, I worked for many years, and I was in a senior position myself and ended up in a very toxic work environment at a time in my life when I didn't, you kind of think those things aren't really going to happen to you, and it went on for a long time. And part of the reason it went on for such a long time is because I didn't really address it properly. If I'd known what my core values were earlier, it would have given me the power to sit back and realise that this environment that I was in was never going to align with who I was. And that can be difficult, and so it's, there are reasons why we ignore those things, because it's going to impact our life. We can't just kind of up and leave a job. We've got financial responsibilities, family responsibilities, and the same in business. You've got priorities in terms of bringing money in and trying to build something, and so we will ignore the things that are causing our stress. But the power really is in recognising what they are, mm-hmm. and finding out through knowing what your values are and having that clarity what it is that's impacting you. And my example, I always kind of refer to my top value being honesty. And you can look back. I can look back in my career and personal life and see where honesty has been, really prevalent, and where it's not. But what I didn't really understand was that it wasn't just about me being an honest person. It was about having to be surrounded by honesty, and because I was in a consistently dishonest environment for a long time, it impacted everything about me and my life, and kind of got worse and worse. So that's why when I did the work on values myself, and became a coach and sort of used it in that environment, I feel really passionate about helping people to see earlier, what those values are, because it then gives them the power to actually do something about those stress triggers and be able to address situations that are causing them real stress, because often, because we care about what we're doing, we care about our work, we want to do a good job, we want to help people, whatever the reason is, we'll keep doing the thing that actually is not good for us because we're trying to do the right thing. And once you know how it's impacting you and what you need to focus on, it then helps you alleviate those stress triggers like overnight. I mean, really, really quickly. Right. A client, a senior manager that I worked with recently, who was ready to quit her job, literally, like that week, and then within a couple of weeks of working together, she was, she could really see, again, that weight had kind of lifted off her shoulders, because she could see that, there's a real freedom in recognising that you can't change somebody else and someone else's values. And actually, when you realise that, you stop all that conflict and trying to change other people, which is just exhausting. So it does, it really has that big impact, I think.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love how you've explained that. We are surrounded by stress all the time, and I think as human beings, mums, caregivers, it's natural to want to avoid conflict. It's like it's almost inherent, anything to have a quiet day and peace. But we'll know ourselves, and I think listeners can definitely do this for themselves, but there will be times in our life where we felt particularly stressed, and it's only when we've faced that we've had the biggest release. We've been relieved of that stress, like you said, pretty instantly, because you feel like you're confident and you're standing your ground in a different way. So I think talking about values really brings that forward, that it's really about knowing yourself and owning yourself. And then when we do that, we are our business as well, and that's kind of reflected in our business too. So how do you see that as a business owner, who obviously you've got your core values and you're running a business? How does that integrate with each other, and how would you describe that?
I think it gives you more understanding of your strengths and weaknesses. I certainly came from the working environment, like most people have at some point. And so the weaknesses were kind of masked a little bit because there were always other people around to do certain things or who had different roles. But when you're a business owner on your own, you're suddenly having to address everything. And again, realising what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are, which comes through the values, the things that are important to you, that you love, you will gravitate towards straight away. I mean, I love, the creative side of it. I could sit all day and just come up with ideas. I've got hundreds of ideas, but then the actual execution of the detail and sitting down and doing that kind of boring bit of hours of writing or researching something is harder. So, but recognizing that, again, just gives you that understanding of yourself, and knowing that when you then have more money in your business and you're able to employ some help, you can see the areas where you can employ people. Yeah. And also the other thing with, if you're lucky enough to grow your business, then again, knowing your values and being a values-led business owner means that you can then use that in terms of, recruiting people, getting the right mix of people to work with right from the beginning, because actually recruiting for values is much more beneficial than recruiting for skills, because skills can all be taught.
Yeah, love that. I think it's really important as a business owner to understand your values, and when we are looking at our values, I feel like they're like gifts. It's like, this is our gift because this is very much inherent in us, and if we understand what the essence of us is, then we can kind of honour it, we can respect it, we can protect it. But when we don't know, we're kind of just looking externally all the time. And there's always that kind of, we touched on this, I think, in the last one, we were talking about gut instincts as well. And again, that comes to, like, if we know and understand ourselves better, we know how to navigate better, we know how to make decisions better. And so what can we do then if we're trying to manage them? We obviously want to manage them better because we know the importance of them, and we want to use them as this kind of sat-nav kind of indicator, a guide to realign us whenever we need to. What would you say to the listeners in terms of managing them?
I think on a day-to-day, once you know what your values are, you can encourage people to then sort of journal around values. Just keep it really, really simple. And so if you're feeling, it's not something that you have to do every day, but I would really encourage people to check in at the start, at least once a month, or once a week actually at the start, and then moving to kind of once a month, where you can just check in with where the stress is in your day today. So for example, we've just decided crazily to get a second dog, and this morning's been a bit of a stressful morning with that dog, although they're very good. But what I recognise is, rather than going nuts and being, really stressed and with whoever, or with the dogs or anything like that, I realised that, part of my, one of my core values is autonomy. So currently this week with a new dog in the house, I don't feel like I have an awful lot of autonomy because I'm sort of guided by when this dog needs to go out, etc. So just understanding that kind of takes the temperature down, so you're not kind of thinking I should be calmer, and then you start beating yourself up and you're negative about ourselves, which just goes nowhere. It doesn't help at all. You kind of sit with it, the discomfort, and think, okay, this is the reason why I'm so stressed. Accept it, and then look at, can I do anything about it, or how can I make myself feel better about it? And particularly when you've got a family, and interestingly with values, your children don't have necessarily the same core values as you. They'll undoubtedly have the same personal values because you're brought up in the same household, but your core values can be different. And so again, that can really help with those relationships where you're thinking, why don't they just do what I want them to do in this time?
Oh my goodness, we need to hear this.
It's that is really helpful as well, that actually you can't control other people's values and what their priorities are. You just have to manage your own, and it does make it easier.
Wow, that is so fascinating. That's something all mums need to hear, because how often have we kind of beaten ourselves about it and blamed ourselves that we haven't taught them right, and that's why they're behaving in a certain way, when naturally their instinct, they're maybe following that, and it's much stronger than what we are saying. So it's not to say they're trying to cause friction or conflict for us. That's not their intention at all. No. So interesting. And another way that we can manage them is to think about what kind of boundaries we might need to have that would actually help us it would become like a tool and an aid for us to adhere to them, or allow others to recognise that they're there. And that's really interesting, isn't it? Because again, everybody has such different values, and the boundaries will look very different for different people too.
Yeah, and again, often, I think as a, I don't want to stereotype, but, as a mum, generally, we're thinking of 100 things a minute in terms of you're working on your business, but you're also thinking, did I get something out of the freezer for dinner? Did I book that dentist appointment? Is that, that can take over, especially again when you're working on your own, or if you're working at home, trying to build a business. Those priorities don't go away. So if you can try to create boundaries around this certain time of day, or these days in the week I am not responsible for the food that is eaten, it's someone else's responsibility, things like that, you can start to create some structure that will help you manage those other equally important areas of your life, rather than everything clashing and causing stress and making things a lot worse.
It's working with it in a really positive way, isn't it? It's like, what can we do? How can we use those
to help us. And just like you said, it takes that pressure off and it brings the temperature down. It totally does. What you said before made me think, well, we don't go into this rabbit hole of negative thinking because we're blaming ourselves for what we didn't or did do or we didn't get right.
Yeah.
And before we do that, if we recognised that that value was triggered, so therefore that's why I reacted that way, therefore it makes sense I was stressed, it might not have acted the way I should have, and that's fine, I can change that as behaviour, but understanding that kind of stops this downward spiral from starting. And we know how powerful our thoughts are, right? So those things, we're probably not saying them out loud, but we are saying them to ourselves. And again, it just brings us back to like being more of our own self rather than trying to be something else, which actually leads very nicely to the next topic we're going to talk about in the next session, which is how you can use values to create an authentic brand in the age of AI. So definitely check out that episode. But before we go, we're just going to share some free resources that would be really helpful. So Sarah, do you want to talk about the resource that you have?
Yeah, sure. So it's a free mini version in a workbook of my core values discovery process. So you can actually go through it on your own, work through the way that I work through it with clients, and start to get an understanding of what your values are and how they show up for you.
Fantastic. I will pop the link in the podcast notes as well. And for the boundaries piece, if you're interested to work out what areas do you need to work on, what would be most beneficial for you to focus on, then you can uncover your own boundary clock with my freebie, which is a boundary clock worksheet, and you can get that at buildwithboundaries.com/clock. So thank you so much, Sarah. We will all see you in the next episode.